In 1979, a battered van roamed the streets of Southern California. Inside, two men carried a box of ordinary tools: pliers, ice picks, a sledgehammer. But what they did with them was anything but ordinary. Over the span of just 5 months, Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris abducted, tortured, and murdered teenage girls. And they recorded it all. The cassette tape they left behind would become one of the most horrifying pieces of evidence ever encountered by law enforcement. Seasoned detectives broke down listening to it. FBI agents described it as a sound that never leaves you. Welcome back to Prison Stories. Today we will remember the story of the Toolbox Killers, two men who formed a deadly pact behind prison walls and then unleashed one of the most sadistic killing sprees in American history. But to understand the horror they unleashed, we need to go back to where these two men first met and made a deadly pact. In 1977, two convicted felons crossed paths inside the California men's colony in San Luis Obispo. Lawrence Bittaker was highly intelligent, with an IQ of 138, yet spent most of his adult life behind bars for burglary and assault. Cold, manipulative, and without remorse, he once said he preferred prison to the outside world because he didn't have to pretend. Roy Norris, on the other hand, was volatile and unpredictable. He had a long history of sexual violence and was known for his explosive temper. By the time he met Bittaker, he had already committed multiple assaults against women. In most prisons, inmates try to keep to themselves. But not these two. They gravitated toward one another, bonding over shared fantasies of abducting young girls. Within months, their conversations turned into detailed plans. They'd talk about what kind of victims they'd target, how they'd capture them, and what they wanted to do once they had them. It was no longer fantasy. It was a blueprint. They made a pact. Once they were released, they'd reunite and start hunting together. That day came just a year later, and they kept their promise. After their release in 1979, Bittaker and Norris reunited in Los Angeles, just as they had planned. Bittaker purchased a silver GMC cargo van. On the outside, it looked like any other work vehicle, but on the inside, it was stripped of all seating and soundproofed by the tools they'd learned about in prison. They called it Murder Mac. Inside, they stocked what looked like an ordinary toolbox: a hammer, a pair of pliers, an ice pick, duct tape. But in the hands of these two men, they weren't tools. They were weapons. For weeks, the pair practiced, cruising around the beach cities, following girls, watching how they moved. Then, on June 24th, 1979, they made their first move. Lucinda Schaefer, just 16 years old, was walking home from a church event in Torrance when the van pulled up beside her. She never made it home. Bittaker and Norris forced her into the van, silenced her, and drove into the remote San Gabriel Mountains. What happened next was only known to the two men, until one of them confessed. They gagged her with tape, bound her hands and feet, and took turns assaulting her. When they were done, they argued over how to kill her. Bittaker wanted something quiet, so Norris strangled her with a coat hanger, while Bittaker tightened it with pliers. Her body was thrown off a cliff, but the story didn't end there. This was only the beginning of what would become a 5-month spree of abduction, torture, and murder, each victim more brutalized than the last. As the months passed, their crimes grew more depraved. Killing was not enough for THM. They carried on a series of torture and sadistic behavior. Each abduction was an opportunity to push the boundaries of pain and control. And by October 1979, they weren't satisfied with just remembering what they'd done. They wanted to listen to it. Their final known victim was Shirley Lynette Ledford, a 16-year-old girl hitchhiking home after a Halloween party in Los Angeles. She was lured into the van by Bittaker, who posed as a friendly driver. What followed was not just torture, but recorded torture. Using cassette recorder, the pair documented everything. Her screams, her pleas for mercy, and the chilling voices of the two men, egging each other on, were all captured on tape. That tape would later become the single most horrifying piece of evidence in the case. Detectives who heard described it as hell on audio. One officer had to leave the room. Another broke down in tears. It was so graphic, so psychologically disturbing, that only a select few were ever allowed to hear it, and even those few have carried it with them for life. FBI profilers have since used the recording during training to show what true evil sounds like, though it's never been released publicly. Shirley's body was found on a front lawn in Sunland, bruised, broken, and thrown away like trash. But what the killers didn't realize was that her death would lead to their downfall. Bittaker and Norris believed they were untouchable. 5 victims, but without any lead or witnesses. But all it took was one slip. Shortly after Shirley Ledford's murder, Roy Norris couldn't help himself. He began bragging to a former prison acquaintance about the girls he and Bittaker had abducted, raped, and murdered. The man, horrified, went straight to the police. Investigators quietly began digging into both men. Norris had a record of sexual assault. Bittaker had a long list of arrests. When they obtained a warrant to search Bittaker's home and van, what they found confirmed their worst fears. Polaroid photos of young girls, some missing, a silver van, stripped and stained, and in Norris's possession, the cassette tape. Under pressure, Norris cracked. In a full confession, he detailed everything: the victims, the torture, the disposal of the bodies in remote areas of the San Gabriel Mountains. He even led police to 2 of the shallow graves. The final count: 5 confirmed victims, though authorities believed there could be more. The trial of Lawrence Bittaker was unlike anything the courtroom had seen. Prosecutors didn't just present photographs or testimony. They played the tape. Jurors were visibly shaken. One woman covered her ears. Several asked to be excused. Even the most hardened court officials admitted they had never experienced anything like it. The evidence was overwhelming. In 1981, Lawrence Bittaker was sentenced to death for the murders. He remained on death row at San Quentin State Prison until his death in 2019 from natural causes. Roy Norris, in exchange for his full confession and cooperation, received 45 years to life. He died in 2020 while serving his sentence. To this day, the cassette tape remains sealed, classified as too disturbing for the public. FBI profilers continue to reference the case in training sessions, warning new agents about the reality of evil that kills with pleasure. Bittaker and Norris were too evil but not smart. The recording of their crimes proved to be fatal for themselves. What they left behind wasn't just a trail of victims. It was a blueprint of sadism, a chilling reminder that monsters don't always lurk in shadows. Sometimes they drive vans. If this story disturbed you, there are others that haunt investigators to this day. Thank you for watching Prison Stories. If you liked the video, hit like, share, and subscribe so you never miss our videos.